Weep Not, Child, 1964, is the debut novel by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, then writing as James Ngũgĩ, a prominent Kenyan writer, playwright, and scholar. It holds historical significance as the first major novel in English by an East African author and marked the emergence of a literary voice deeply engaged in the political and social upheavals of colonial and post-colonial Africa. Set in colonial Kenya during the Mau Mau Uprising, a nationalist revolt against British imperial rule, the novel combines political history, personal tragedy, and moral development through the eyes of a young boy, Ngũgĩ. It addresses themes of colonialism, land alienation, education, generational conflict, and resistance, exploring how individual aspirations are shaped and shattered by larger historical forces. The title, Weep Not, Child, taken from Walt Whitman's poem, suggests both comfort and denial, urging resilience in the face of despair but also hinting at the futility of false hope under oppressive systems. Setting and background. The novel takes place in a Kikuyu village during the 1950s, against the backdrop of the Mau Mau Rebellion, a violent and transformative anti-colonial movement. The Kikuyu people, among Kenya's largest ethnic groups, are at the heart of the land struggles that fueled the uprising. British settlers have seized vast tracts of land, dispossessing indigenous communities and subjecting them to harsh economic and political conditions. Ngũgĩ and the promise of education. The protagonist, Ngũgĩ, is the youngest son of Ngotho, a tenant laborer on land owned by Mr. Howlands, a British settler. Ngũgĩ becomes the first in his family to attend school, a privilege viewed with hope by his parents. Education, in this context, symbolizes freedom, empowerment, and the promise of a better future. Ngũgĩ is idealistic and intelligent, believing that through education he can uplift his family and community. His academic success becomes the family's pride and emotional refuge, especially as political tensions escalate around them. Land, resistance, and family tensions. Ngotho is a complex figure, respected in the village but diminished under colonial rule. Though proud of his ancestral connection to the land, he is unable to assert ownership or independence. His psychological torment reflects the loss of land, dignity, and masculinity faced by colonized men. Ngotho's sons from a previous marriage, particularly Boro, embody another response to colonial injustice. Boro is a traumatized World War II veteran who becomes increasingly radicalized, eventually joining the Mau Mau movement. He represents the shift from passive endurance to militant resistance. Tensions rise when Ngotho defends the white landowner during a workers' strike, resulting in Job, a political activist, being beaten. Ngotho is fired and humiliated, further deepening the family's poverty and internal strife. Escalation of violence and disillusionment. As the Mau Mau rebellion intensifies, the colonial state imposes military rule, detentions, and torture. Villages are raided, and many, including Ngũgĩ's schoolmates, are arrested or killed. Boro becomes a freedom fighter while Kamau, another brother, is imprisoned. Ngũgĩ, caught between his dreams of education and the brutal reality of colonial violence, becomes increasingly isolated. When his school is closed and his scholarship withdrawn, his hopes crumble. The girl he loves, Mwihaki, the daughter of a loyalist chief, becomes emotionally unreachable, symbolizing the collapse of unity and reconciliation across class and political lines. Eventually, Ngũgĩ is arrested and tortured by colonial police who suspect him of being connected to Mau Mau through his family. Though innocent, he is subjected to the same dehumanizing tactics used to break political dissent. Tragic ending. The novel ends on a note of emotional and symbolic defeat. Ngũgĩ returns home broken, his ideals crushed. His father, Ngotho, dies, ashamed of his failure to protect his family and land. Boro, the militant, kills Mr. Howlands in vengeance but is ultimately arrested. In a moment of despair, Njoroge attempts suicide, only to be saved by his mother. He is left disillusioned and resigned, forced to face a reality where neither education nor pacifism has brought liberation. The novel closes with an ambiguous sense of endurance, grief and despair remain, but so does life. Major themes. 1. Colonialism and land dispossession. At the heart of the novel is the colonial theft of land, which Ngũgĩ presents as the root of spiritual, social, and economic destruction. The Kikuyu view land not only as property but as heritage, identity, and sustenance. Ngotho's status as a laborer on land that once belonged to his ancestors symbolizes the dispossession and emasculation of the African male under colonialism. Mr. Howlands, the white settler, represents the brutality of imperialism, believing in the civilizing mission while enforcing violent repression. Ngũgĩ critiques this ideology by showing its moral hollowness and devastating impact. 2. Education and disillusionment. Initially, education is portrayed as a pathway to liberation, and Njoroge as its vessel of hope. However, as colonial repression tightens, education is shown to be inadequate in the face of structural violence. The colonial school system produces docile subjects, not empowered citizens. Njoroge's fall from academic hope to psychological despair mirrors Kenya's disillusionment with the idea that colonial structures can be reformed from within. The novel suggests that true change must be rooted in structural, not symbolic, transformation. 3. Family and generational conflict. The family dynamic in Weep Not, Child reflects the tensions between submission and resistance, tradition and modernity. Ngotho's generation clings to the past, trying to work within colonial constraints, while Boro's generation embraces radical change through armed resistance. Njoroge, meanwhile, represents a third path, a dreamer who hopes for peaceful progress. His tragedy lies in being caught between these two worlds, unable to reconcile hope with reality. 4. Violence, resistance, and moral complexity. Ngũgĩ presents the Mau Mau rebellion with sympathy but also moral nuance. While characters like Boro take up arms, the novel does not glorify violence. Instead, it reveals how colonialism forces people into impossible moral positions, where silence becomes complicity and action risks death. Boro's transformation from a grieving son to a militant reflects the psychological cost of injustice. His decision to kill Mr. Howlands is both vengeance and a desperate act of reclaiming agency. Yet it brings no resolution, only further tragedy. 5. Hope and despair. The novel's title reflects a tension between hope and despair. While the command, "Weep Not," suggests endurance, the narrative ultimately depicts a community consumed by grief. Ngũgĩ seems to say that while tears may not bring change, neither will passive optimism. Njoroge's suicide attempt underscores the loss of innocence and the futility of idealism in the face of entrenched injustice. Yet his survival points to a possibility of future struggle, even if quietly gestured. Narrative style and structure. 1. Linear and simple structure. The novel follows a chronological and straightforward narrative, aligning with the perspective of a young protagonist. The simplicity of the structure mirrors Njoroge's own journey, from clarity to confusion, from hope to disillusionment. Ngũgĩ uses clear, evocative language, drawing on oral storytelling traditions while employing a modern narrative voice. This allows him to speak both to African audiences and an international readership. 2. Symbolism. Land symbolizes heritage, freedom, and continuity. Its loss is the central trauma. The school, initially a symbol of hope and upliftment, later, a site of betrayal. The train, symbol of change, modernity, and dislocation. The title evokes both resilience and repression. It urges strength but implies sorrow. 3. Bildungsroman elements. Weep Not, Child is partially a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story. Njoroge's journey from childhood to disillusionment is marked by psychological growth and a painful awareness of social realities. His personal development parallels Kenya's political awakening, making his story both individual and collective. Historical context. The novel is set during the Mau Mau Rebellion, 1952 to 1960, a pivotal moment in Kenya's fight for independence. The British colonial government responded to the uprising with brutal repression, mass detentions, torture, and executions. Though the Mau Mau were eventually defeated militarily, the movement played a major role in mobilizing resistance and forcing political change. Ngũgĩ wrote the novel in the early years of Kenyan independence, reflecting both the legacy of colonial violence and the uncertain path ahead. It is not a celebratory narrative of triumph, but a sobering reminder of the cost of freedom. Critical reception and legacy. Weep Not, Child was acclaimed for its emotional power, political insight, and pioneering voice. Critics praised Ngũgĩ's humanistic portrayal of ordinary Africans caught in the currents of history. It helped establish Ngũgĩ as a leading voice in African literature. Over time, the novel has been read as part of Ngũgĩ's larger body of work that critiques colonialism, Western education, and cultural imperialism, and that later advocates for writing in African languages as a form of resistance. Conclusion. Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o's Weep Not, Child is a powerful and poignant novel that captures the trauma of colonialism and the fragility of hope. Through the story of Njoroge and his family, Ngũgĩ explores how education, land, and identity are all sites of struggle under imperial rule. The novel's emotional force lies in its depiction of a young boy's shattered dreams, mirroring a nation's painful journey toward liberation. While not offering easy answers, Weep Not, Child calls for remembrance, resistance, and above all, the courage to confront history's wounds, even when hope seems unreachable.